All right, hello everyone, and welcome to today's episode of CAPHC Presents. My name is Doug Maynard, and I'm the Associate Director at CAPHC, the Canadian Association of Pediatric Health Centres. And today's webinar is titled The Power of Touch and Infant Cuddling Programs. Before we go on, I'd like to mention the 2015 CAPHC Annual Conference, which is coming up on October 18th to the 20th in Quebec City. Everyone's invited to join us in Quebec City, where we'll learn and share our expertise throughout the child and youth healthcare community to talk about solutions in children's healthcare. Some great speakers and a real range of topics, from child development and children's rehab to palliative care services and all sorts of other interesting things there. And you can always find more information at www.conference.caphc.org, and the website's up on the screen there. All right, so on with today's webinar. As I mentioned, today's webinar is titled The Power of Touch and Infant Cuddling Programs, and this is a real exciting opportunity for CAPHC to showcase one of our recent partnerships and some of the great work of our member organizations from across the country. Earlier this year, we were approached by Huggies, the diaper company, asking about infant cuddling programs, and they were aware that some hospitals had them and some didn't. And at CAPHC, we certainly were aware that these programs existed, but certainly didn't have any data on their prevalence. So we did a bit of work with Huggies. We were happy to have their support to sort of do some of this work, and we did a survey of our membership across Canada, and we had great response to the survey, asking about what programs existed and what did they look like, what was the structure of these programs. About half of those that responded did have some type of role for cuddlers across the country, whether it was a formal program through their volunteer department, or whether it was just a role that was taken on by professionals within the unit, often nurses within NICUs or child life specialists or that sort of thing. But of the half that didn't have programs, all of the ones that did not have programs were interested in getting some resources that might help them start one. So everyone really recognizing the benefits that these cuddling programs could provide to infants and children. And since the motivation for developing these cuddling programs is really related to the importance of touch in the development of infants, it immediately brought to mind some of the work that CAPHC has been doing for quite a few years in partnering with a number of researchers and research teams from across Canada on issues related to children's pain. And we've been doing that work. In fact, that's where CAPHC's webinar series started, was working with the CIHR team in children's pain. And a lot of that work talked about non-pharmacological methods to manage pain, many of which use touch, such as skin-to-skin care and kangaroo care and all sorts of things like that we're going to be hearing about a bit later. So I reached out to one of our colleagues in that work, Dr. Christine Chambers at the IWK Health Centre in Halifax, and I really need to thank her for jumping right in and really seeing the opportunity to sort of cross-pollinate this work around cuddling programs and the importance of touch with that work that they had been doing around children's pain. And Christine really helped in pulling some of her colleagues and experts from around the country, such as Dr. Marsha Campbell-Yeo, who we're going to hear from in a moment, and really start pulling together, and they started to pull together a white paper that Marsha is going to present, and to tell us what the evidence says about touch, so that we can really move forward in this conversation from an evidence base. And that led to a small group from the IWK Health Centre, the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario in Ottawa, and Southlake Regional Hospital in Newmarket, all working together to talk about a framework or a set of guidelines that we can maybe share across the country to help organizations develop these cuddling programs, or at least share their experience. So I really do, as I mentioned, want to thank Huggies for reaching out to us and starting this conversation, and for providing support to do this work, to develop the white paper, to host this webinar, develop the guidelines, and they are going to be working with a couple of our member organizations that don't have programs that are interested in developing cuddling programs. So they're going to be using the information that we've been able to work with our partners across the country to pull together to help a couple of hospitals actually implement a cuddling program in their organization. So, and all of this work is through their initiative, the No Baby Unhugged initiative, and more information on that can be found at nobabyunhugged.huggies.com. So you'll find links to the white paper that Dr. Chambers and Dr. Campbell-Yeo produced, and their team at IWK. You're also going to get a chance to see Sandra Payne, who we're also going to hear from in a bit, and some of her volunteers from Southlake Regional Hospital. You get a chance to see them actually in action in some videos on that site. So some great information. So it's been a real fun project to talk about infant cuddling programs and the power of hugs, or the power of touch. And so it's really it's going to be a fun session today. So it's my pleasure to introduce our panel. First up, we're going to be hearing from Dr. Marsha Campbell-Yeo, who is an assistant professor and certified neonatal nurse practitioner and clinician scientist at the School of Nursing at Dalhousie University and the Center for Pediatric Pain Research at the IWK Health Centre in Halifax. She holds grants that are examining maternal-led interventions primarily related to touch to improve outcomes of medically at-risk newborns, specifically related to pain, stress, and neurodevelopment. And then we're going to be hearing from a couple of different cuddling programs across the country to talk about their experiences and challenges and successes in implementing these programs. And we're going to hear from Sandra Payne, who's a nurse educator for the Pediatric and Neonatal Intensive Care Unit at Southlake Regional Health Centre in Newmarket. Sandra was a bedside nurse, but transitioned to an educator role with Southlake in 2012, and she's their breastfeeding-friendly lead for the hospital. And as a pediatric nurse educator, Sandra's developed and implemented a number of new initiatives with the maternal child program, including their Cuddler program within their NICU. We're also going to hear from Nanette Labelle, who has managed the volunteer and high school co-op education programs for the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario, or CHEO, in Ottawa. She's got a number of volunteer roles within their volunteer portfolio there, and she's implemented a number of new initiatives in the volunteer program, including the support to stable technology-dependent patients through simulation, their epilepsy monitoring unit, and she's their patient safety ambassador. Nanette works collaboratively with the Volunteer Association in supporting their mission throughout the hospital in Ottawa. So it's my pleasure to hand the virtual podium over to start this off to hear from Dr. Marsha Campbell-Yeo. Over to you, Marsha.
Oh, hello, Doug, and hello, everyone. I'm quite excited to be here today, and I must say, as someone who has cared for mothers and their babies for over 25 years as a clinician, as a researcher, I want to first start by thanking you, Doug, and CAPHC for the opportunity to participate in this webinar and for allowing me to share over the next 20 minutes. Hopefully you'll hear my passion for this topic, but also the findings of our white paper that were commissioned, as Doug mentioned, by Huggies, and our many thanks to them for seeking our advice on this important topic. And our paper will discuss, of course, as we said, the importance of human touch for babies. Before I begin, I would like to acknowledge, as Doug mentioned, Dr. Christine Chambers from the Center for Pediatric Pain, who was instrumental in bringing our group together and seeking our assistance in making this white paper a reality. And of course, to acknowledge Brittany Benoit and Caitlin Boyner, who are PhD students in our Center for Pediatric Pain, Brittany in the School of Nursing, a doctoral student, and Caitlin Boyner in the Clinical Psychology program, and both at Dalhousie University. Both were instrumental in the paper, and as Doug mentioned, you can find that at the No Baby Unhugged website. So to begin, I think that all of you can agree that protecting and comforting one's young is an essential and important component of mothering and parenting. And that touch really is an innate aspect of both the social and physical development and of our young, and also really is essential for the survival of both humans and really all species. We also know that touch is the earliest sense to develop, and even as young as 8 weeks gestation, a fetus is able to respond to the sensation of touch in utero. We know that in utero, twins have been observed on ultrasound as really as early as 14 weeks of gestation, seen by ultrasound sucking on their twins' faces and toes and fingers, and really appearing to be exploring and touching their twins' faces. It is through this really early exposure to both their own touch as well as the touch of others that babies learn about their environment. They learn how to cope better when exposed to new surroundings, new people, and new situations. We really don't know exactly how touch works, but it really has been theorized and been shown by science that the primary benefits of touch are derived from the stimulation of C fibers in the skin, leading to the release of endorphins, oxytocin, and serotonin, all considered to be love hormones. These hormones produce pleasant sensations and feelings and really promote affiliative behaviors, both initially early in life, but also that help throughout the remainder of our lives in relationships. We also know that this innate need for touch and comfort was further demonstrated by the famous Harlow experiments related to attachment and love, where baby rhesus monkeys were isolated from their mothers, and yet they still consistently preferred a terry cloth surrogate over a wire mesh, even though the wire mesh was the one that actually provided nutrition to these babies. And I would really like people who are listening in the audience, especially those who have experience in nursery and neonatal care, to pause. And I would like you to think about the isolation studies and Harlow's question of the importance of touch, and to see whether or not have we actually overlooked some of the fundamental need for human contact in our tiny patients, and have allowed technology to really supersede the importance of touch. Moving forward beyond Harlow's work over 50 years ago, have others asked the question about the importance of human touch? Well, the answer is a resounding yes. There has been over 600 scientific papers that have been published on the effects of human touch in newborns. These include systematic reviews and studies conducted by research teams around the world, and they looked at benefits of infant touch or touch for babies with respect to responses to pain, their ability that touch can be comforting, the impact on physiologic outcomes such as heart rate and oxygenation. They looked at behavioral outcomes such as crying and sleep, other outcomes such as cognitive development, mental health, and weight gain. They even looked at parental outcomes such as parental well-being, parent-infant interactions, and breastfeeding rates have all been fully studied within this group of research. Together, these studies have demonstrated that babies have an innate need to be loved and nurtured, and to be able to learn to develop trust and to have attachment, regardless of whether or not they're born extremely preterm, ill at birth, or whether they're healthy newborns heading home soon after birth. The studies of babies, both animal and human, have demonstrated that suboptimal conditions, such as infants being separated from their mothers, have shown the striking negative impact with respect to this separation. The effects have also been demonstrated with respect to delay in growth and development, increased morbidity, higher levels of stress in these babies, and issues with attachment and proper bonding with caregivers. It has also been shown that babies need a certain amount of stimulation and touch to promote healthy and normal development, including physical development, how their bodies grow, emotional development with respect to their mental health and how they learn to manage their feelings, behavioral development, how they learn to control and manage their own behavior, as well as social development, how they learn to interact with other people. Given the enormity of the current research with respect to these 600 papers, the purpose of my talk today is really to give you a broad overview of the synthesis of the current state of evidence related to the importance of human touch. This was the emphasis of the white paper, to be able to provide a lay summary of the quality of the evidence to help improve the awareness with respect to the importance of touch. One of the things that came very clear to us with respect to the literature is that it's important to note that there is variation in the types of benefits of touch, and they are affected by various aspects. These include the gestational age of the baby, For instance, babies who are born extremely preterm may not respond well to the intermittent touch, such as stroking or massage, because their dermis and skin is not yet fully developed. And so they tend to do better with a constant pressure without this stroking or change in pressure. We also know that aspects of the baby's environment can impact their need for touch and the type of touch that they require. We know that within their mother's uterus, these babies have really limited exposure to noise and light. This promotes sleep and ensures continuous access to the mother's smell and voice. However, if these babies are born too soon and born prematurely, not only are they separated from their mother, but they are also separated from her smell and this recognition of the pheromones and smell that they relate to their mother and safety. They're also bombarded with excessive light and noise, and this leads to constant sleep interruption, all of which has been shown to negatively impact their brain development. Therefore, it's important that parents and other care providers are aware of touch practices that positively influence the development in these babies who are born preterm or those who are born sick. Simply exposing babies to their mother's touch or another person's touch may not lead to all the cumulative effects of also having access to familiar smell. So across the different types of touch, the following benefits have been supported by science. Benefits related to faster weight gain, shorter hospital times, improved physiologic stability, decreased pain response, improvement in sleep, diminished anxiety and stress, stronger immune systems, healthier brain development, improvement in social skills and relationships, as well as cognitive skills such as language. As I mentioned before, there are many different types of touch, and the type of touch that is appropriate depends on the environmental context, who is available to the baby, whether this is in the hospital or at home, whether it is a healthcare provider, a parent, or an alternative person who is providing the touch, and whether the care provider has the appropriate skills and training to deliver the type of touch based on the infant's individualized needs. Some of the most common types of touch include holding or rocking, facilitated tucking, infant massage, skin-to-skin care or kangaroo care, or kangaroo mother care, and I'll explain the difference as we move forward. It is really these types of touch that we're going to spend the remainder of our discussion this morning. Holding and touching is the most common form of touch. Holding or rocking has been by either the baby bundled in a blanket or wearing clothing by a caregiver. Interestingly, this is the touch that has been least studied. In fact, there is really a paucity of information about simple holding and rocking in the newborn period. I'd like to start now to tell you about where the quality of evidence is, and just to orientate you a little bit to how I'm going to show this, you will see that the outcomes that are listed within the studies that we're going to review are on the left, with evidence for both preterm babies in the first column as well as then evidence for full-term babies. We elected to break this down based on gestational age because it's very important that certain people will be caring for infants perhaps in a neonatal intensive care unit, and some of the findings there may not be relevant to those babies who are considered more full-term or those who perhaps have been born at term but who require prolonged hospitalization secondary to perhaps surgical intervention. So with respect to rocking and holding, or also just to orientate you to this, if you see a check mark, that means that there's sufficient evidence to tell you that we should be doing this in the clinical setting. If we see an X, it means that it is actually harmful and we should not be doing it in the clinical setting, and there's sufficient evidence to tell us. we see a little square empty box. That means we really don't know. There's neither harm nor helpfulness that we know with respect to the evidence. And if we have a question mark, which we see lots of them here, it really means there's insufficient evidence, and we've yet to look at this specifically in this population. So going back to the most common forms of rocking and holding, there's really only one aspect in that with respect to full-term babies, there's sufficient evidence to tell us that following painful procedures, the holding or rocking of a baby can help diminish pain response. Moving forward to another type of touch called facilitated tucking. This is a developmentally supportive therapy in which we hold the baby's arms and legs either flexed together in front of them, close to the trunk, or in the case of an infant who can't be flexed, we can simply provide boundaries with the hands. It's different than swaddling or bundling because it has to include the actual touch of a care provider or parent. With respect to the evidence, we see that actually it's the preterm infants who've been most studied, and with little study being done in the full-term population. The evidence tells us that this is an effective therapy and can be used for infants with improvements in their responses to pain. It will help stabilize their heart rate and their oxygen levels, as well as it's been reported to parents to being one of the preferences of what they'd like to do if their babies require intensive care. We also can see with respect to crying that reduced crying has been seen in both preterm and full-term infants if we use this type of therapy. Well, what about infant massage? Not just some simple touch, but really that stroking of massage over the entire baby. This has been used in many settings, both in hospital as well as after discharge, and we have seen it used when I did some work in India with respect to actually trying to improve mother-infant relationships by asking mothers to massage their babies with oil twice a day in the neonatal intensive care unit. But what does the evidence tell us about this? Well, we can see that with respect to preterm infants, we do see that it does reduce crying and that it has been associated to decrease morbidity, improve weight gain and growth, and actually reduce time in hospital. With respect to full-term infants and those actual outcomes, you can see the dotted line. And what that is that there is some evidence, but it's less so in this population, and there seems to be a little bit more equitable outcomes in which we're not really sure if it's helpful or not. We certainly see that it improves parent-infant interactions, and this was the case of why we used it in the developing countries. Moving forward and just finishing as we go along is really, I think we all can see that we need to improve the potential participation in the NICU and hospitals. I believe that one of the most underutilized resources that we have today is parents, and that they want to be involved, and yet we have not actively done so to support that. So with respect to maternal contact, we know that skin-to-skin contact is the ventral upright holding of a baby wearing only a diaper against the mother's bare chest, and is often referred to kangaroo care. Some people actually refer to it as kangaroo mother care, but these are actually two distinct definitions. Skin-to-skin contact or kangaroo care can be considered as intermittent, whereas kangaroo mother care is actually a program in which it is also the holding of a diaper-clad baby, but it's continuously on the baby until the baby begins to sweat or resist, and is also included with exclusive breastfeeding following discharge. With respect to skin-to-skin contact or kangaroo care, we see that there's significant literature both with respect to preterm as well as full-term infants with consistent findings, the improved of decreased pain response, improved physiologic recovery, more stable physiologic outcomes across cardiorespiratory aspects, oxygenation, hypoglycemia, and temperature regulation, and also decreases crying in full-term infants. Similarly, we see that there is evidence in full-term for improved infant mental health, improved parent-infant interactions, as well as breastfeeding rates across both preterm and full-term infants. We also see, with respect to kangaroo mother care, in the more prolonged use, that there's improved infant mental health and also improved parent outcomes. Just wanted to highlight one of the more recent studies, I think, that really speaks to the importance of even a small amount of skin-to-skin contact, in which this was done in which 146 infants aged 25 to 34 weeks of gestation, even only having 1 hour a day for 2 weeks of maternal-infant contact compared to being left in the incubator. They were followed 10 years later with respect to numerous outcomes, physiologic, mental health, cognition, etc. And what the really relevant findings were was after 10 years in the follow-up, it was found that only one hour a day of skin-to-skin contact attenuated stress response, improved autonomic functioning. These babies had more organized sleep. They were better with respect to cognition. They had better relationships, and the mothers and babies had less anxiety after 2 years. This is a great citation. We've just recently published this, and if you're looking for, listed includes every study and every aspect of study with respect to kangaroo care and its benefit in preterm infants, and can be found in open access on Dove Press. Well, what about other providers? We know that most of the studies have looked at mothers, but we also know that there are other people who are certainly of wanting to make a difference in these babies' lives and are available to these infants. So does it matter who provides touch? Well, we do know from the studies that fathers who've provided skin-to-skin contact with their infants have been found to be more sensitive and less intrusive in their interactions with their infants, and that skin-to-skin provided by fathers does provide pain relief in comparison to no skin-to-skin. Also, mothers have been found to be still slightly more beneficial. We also know that massage delivered by mothers as well as trained professionals have had the same impact, with both resulting in increased weight gain. So what are the take-home messages? What the take-home messages behind the power of human touch really are that there are positive aspects of babies and their families when they are allowed to have more access to touch. This relates to reduction in pain relief, improvement in physiologic stability, again with respect to behavioral aspects, crying and sleep. It decreases their time in hospital, improves parent well-being, and improves breastfeeding rate and both mental health of the baby and mothers. What is wonderful is that much of this science is actually starting to be heard by the neonatal and infant groups who are depicting care. We have seen recently a huge paradigm shift in neonatal care to try to facilitate the uninterrupted contact between a mother and a baby. We've seen this emerging paradigm in the transition from open bay to single room care. But what are the research limitations? Well, when we look at the science alone, we can say that there is variability in the implementation of the interventions that they've studied, that there's numerous outcome measures that are utilized with diversity at different time points when the outcomes are assessed to make it difficult to actually come up with conclusions around practice guidelines. There is limited information around alternative care providers, especially healthcare providers or unrelated family members or unrelated care providers, as well as there's definitely a difficulty with differentiating differences between preterm and term infant needs, even though we've tried to do that in the literature. I would also say that one of the paramount issues is trying to find ways to have parents be more readily available to their infants. Certainly the provision of single-room care is one way to do this, but we need to improve our culture of always trying to keep mothers and babies together and families with access. Certainly the issue with respect to the need for cuddler programs is really trying to find a way to counteract the absence of a family when we are unable to try to keep families and babies together. The No Baby on Hug campaign really does emphasize the importance of contact and emphasizes all the science that we have outlined in our white paper, and does, however, recognize the need for perhaps special populations that we're going to hear about later, or situations in which alternative providers may be necessary to provide this care and touch. I would like to take a moment just to also talk about other resources. This is just videos from our Pediatric Pain Center with respect to strategies to increase parents' participation in their care, both to the left for for children undergoing shots and needles, but also to the right with respect to the power of parents' touch in reducing needle pain and using them effectively to improve care in the neonatal intensive care unit. We have been fortunate enough to actually create a series of resources through our Center for Pediatric Pain, which we have now branded under the It Doesn't Have to Hurt Proven Pain Control for Children, in which we're using parent touch as well as parent interventions to decrease pain. We're very excited that we are now going to be leading through the center in a collaboration with Erica M., the Yummy Mummy Club, to try to engage families more readily through the use of social media. And we are having our launch of our It Doesn't Have to Hurt program on September 21st at the Halifax Central Library. There will be means for people live tweetings and to join virtually, and we hope that you will be able to join us for that. And also with respect to this strategy, Dr. Christine Chambers, who is one of the leads, will be actually presenting another webinar on November the 4th to actually talk about the importance of social media as a means of trying to engage families to be more actively involved in their child's pain care. And wanted to mention that our launch will be focused primarily, the first aspect of our program will be focusing on newborn pain for those who are interested today. And perhaps we could just take a minute, Doug, if there's any time left, to just perhaps view our video.
We'll just take control of the screen over to us here, and we'll show at least part of that video and give people a sense of the kind of stuff you're talking about.
Welcoming a newborn baby into the world is a life-changing moment. There are a lot of things for parents and babies to get used to. Many parents don't realize that this includes pain. Almost every baby in the world undergoes painful medical procedures in the first few hours and days after birth, including medicines that are injected with a needle, and routinely get blood tests as part of regular care. Sick or preterm babies often require up to 9 to 10 painful procedures every day, for weeks. And regardless of how many they have, the experience can negatively affect how a child develops. This early exposure to pain can impact how they feel and react to pain later in life, their attention and learning, and even how their brains grow. But clinicians and researchers are working towards solutions. They found some already. Holding a baby clothed only in a diaper and facing you against your bare chest is known as skin-to-skin contact, or kangaroo care. Ideally, it started 15 minutes before a painful procedure, but even as little as 2 minutes can be beneficial. A blanket or shirt can be worn over top for privacy and comfort. And, if they choose, another loved one can do it too.
He seems so much more relaxed and happy. I don't think that any parent should have to sit by and watch their baby without being able to hold them and be there for them.
There are so many benefits of practicing skin-to-skin care. It lowers how much your baby feels in response to pain. It stabilizes their heart rates and oxygen levels, and helps them recover faster.
It just instantly brings you closer, and it just, is very soothing for the baby and even for myself. You just connect more.
For babies that are older and healthy, complementing skin-to-skin care with breastfeeding 5 minutes before a procedure can also enhance the pain-reducing effect. We've learned that skin-to-skin care is safe, free, and natural, and that anyone can do it, anywhere, throughout a child's first year. We've learned that babies experience less pain and that it's good for parents too. Parents have less stress and feel more in control and confident. And while we continue to learn more, there is one thing we know for sure. Parents can make a difference. Talk with your doctor or nurse about using skin-to-skin contact or breastfeeding as a way to relieve baby's pain.
Great.
All right, so
Thank you, Doug. And just to finish, a few key references, and I think we'll probably hold our questions till after the end of the speakers. Is that correct, Doug?
That is correct, that we will wait till after we hear from our next speaker, but my chance to remind everyone to type those questions in as you think of them. Don't feel you have to wait until the end.
Well, thanks very much, Doug.
All right, well, thank you. All right, and so now we're going to move from the East Coast in Halifax over to Ontario, where we're going to hear from a team of presenters. Sandra Payne from Southlake Regional Health Centre in Newmarket, Ontario, and from Nanette Labelle from the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario in Ottawa are going to sort of co-present their experiences with cuddler programs at their hospital. So over to you, Sandra and Nanette.
Thanks, Doug. So as Doug said, I'm Sandra Payne. I'm from Southlake Regional Health Centre here in Newmarket, and I am an educator for the pediatrics and NICU, and with me today is my colleague Nanette from CHEO. So Marsha just shared with us all the wonderful, wonderful benefits of skin-to-skin and showed us all the amazing evidence out there. And what we're going to do today is just talk to you a little bit about how we've put those benefits into practice. We're going to share with you a program that both of our hospitals have put into place to ensure that all of our patients are getting every opportunity to reap the benefits from the human touch. And that program is our Volunteer Cuddler program. But before we begin, I really would like to pull some questions out to all of you who are attending today, and just to see who out there really has, do you have a formal volunteer program that does cuddling? If not, are you thinking about it? So there's 3 poll questions up on the screen, and Doug's going to do something magical here so that you guys can all vote and put your little polling questions in. Then we'll look at the results in a little bit.
Yeah, so just go up and make your selection on the screen. Which of the 3 would sort of represent your situation? You either have a program, you don't have one, but you've had real discussions about it, or no, you don't have a program and it hasn't really even come up in your organization. Just let us know sort of where you're at, and we can see people's votes are coming in. We'll get back to we'll show the responses a little bit later in the presentation. All right, so we'll just close that off, and we'll go back over to you guys, and okay. All right, there we go.
Some of the things that we will be discussing within our presentation is, of course, Marsha's always done a really great job of the importance of skin-to-skin. We're just going to talk about how it works in our organizations. And then, everybody, family integrated care and family-centered care is absolutely the most important thing. So we often get a question, are these cuddler programs really needed? And so that will be a question that we want to address as well. Then we're going to go into a little bit about the role of the cuddler and some of their duties, and how at both centers, from a tertiary hospital to a community hospital, we do our training. And funny enough, we both faced a few challenges with the program, similar challenges, and then some solutions that we have come up with to meet those challenges. Okay, so Nanette. All right. Well, definitely, as you have heard from both Marsha and Sandra, we're looking at just emphasizing how, again, important the skin-to-skin contact is, and that it really is the best practice for the parent and the caregiver. So we definitely recognize that importance, and really to ensure that our patients are given every opportunity to benefit from this type of contact. And being held by a caregiver is a natural, efficient intervention found to have many beneficial effects for babies in hospital. And again, really just stressing that both facilities, so at Southlake and at CHEO, that the intent is really to alleviate the stress associated with hospitalization and illness for the patient, and to enhance the successful transition of critical care parents during their hospital experience. So really focusing on both organizations to reduce the barriers preventing moms and parents from cuddling their infant. All right. So when are cuddler programs needed? Again, while the aim is to always foster a family-centered care model, we have recognized that the presence of a parent caregiver may not always be feasible, and that a volunteer who cuddles should not be perceived as a replacement for the child's family, but rather as an added support to the family unit. As you can see that we have we have different audiences of patients admitted to our NICUs, and that for CHEO, we can certainly speak to the fact that we've got long-term surgical infants. And for Sandra's experience in her facility, if Sandra, you want to speak a bit to that? Yeah, so as a community hospital, we do have of families that have other children, and bringing them into the hospital can be taxing at times, and they have other needs at home. They have a little girl that's, in school, they have to go pick up the school. So there are opportunities when the family just cannot make it to that bedside. And so that child in the NICU can be left alone for long periods of time while the family is out taking care of their other members. There's often infants who are waiting for adoption, so they've been given up, or and they're waiting for foster parents to come along, so they don't have that interaction with a family member. The other one is our neonatal abstinence syndrome babies. We tend to see at least one or two in our NICU at a time, and for whatever reason, the baby's either been apprehended by CAS or they have supervised visits with the family. So these are type of population that we are seeing where this cuddler program would definitely benefit from. So here at Southlake, I'm just going to start with how did our program start, give a little bit of background, and it came from our staff. Our staff spoke up. We have a culture at Southlake of just speak up and let us know what we're doing well, let us know what we can do better. And having a large number of neonatal abstinence syndrome babies within our NICU, my nurses felt that they weren't meeting their needs. I'd often get calls, Sandra, we'd have to go to a delivery, I have a baby, can you just come and snuggle this baby? And I spent a fair amount of time in there holding babies, typing on the keyboard, and my manager, we would tag team back and forth as needed. And one day my staff member just said to me, why can't we have a volunteer come in here and cuddle these babies for us? There's got to be someone out there who wants to snuggle a baby. And I was like, what a fantastic opportunity. Absolutely, we should do this. And that's when I liaised on with our volunteer office and we got things rolling. So our program started back in 2012, and a little bit of a slow start because we didn't really have any framework or anything. I kind of just sat down and thought, what do we need to do? And it's taken off from there. And as you can see from the No Baby Unhugged program and the video, which Southlake Regional Health Centre and the NICU was featured in, we've come a long way, and we've been able to really meet the needs of especially of these NAS babies, and our volunteers are just a fantastic, fantastic group of women. All right. So when it comes to CHEO here in Ottawa, being the coordinator of the volunteer program, I have to say that the number one request of our community members to volunteer at the hospital is that they want to rock a baby. And so for many, many years, our family forum, which is a advocacy committee, or advisory committee, pardon me, have been wanting to look at how can we implement exactly that type of role within our hospital. And so after much campaigning and advocacy from our family forum with our team here at CHEO, NICU implemented the cuddler role in 2009. And it's been a very successful and positive program. And when we do have the opportunity to graduate these patients from NICU onto the inpatient unit, we have been able to continue on that tradition of providing cuddling when patients are admitted to the inpatient units. Right. So let's just go back to our poll question, if we can, Doug, to see what the results were and who out there does have a program who has it, or thinking about one.
Sure. Yeah, the answers came in very much similar to when we surveyed the CAPHC membership across the country as to who had programs that didn't. It was about half of the respondents said they did have a program. Similar here, it's at 41%. Saying that they had a program. The audience for this webinar goes well beyond CAPHC's membership, so we still see almost half have a program and almost half don't. 13% said they don't have a program, but they have had discussions. So that's quite interesting.
Fantastic. So hopefully maybe that they can get some stuff out of this webinar, and we'll definitely be able to answer any questions they might have. So just moving back along. So let's talk a little bit about the role of the cuddler. What does a cuddler actually do? Basically, they simply hold the infant, they read to them, they quietly sing to them. They're there to give comfort to the infants in the absence of that parent or guardian. They provide that therapeutic talk and that therapeutic touch that Marsha was talking about. And I just want to emphasize that they do not do clinical activities. They don't feed babies, they don't change diapers, and they don't walk around with the babies. It's too much of a fall risk. They're purely there for that social aspect and that comfort and that magical benefit of touch. They also have a couple other duties within an NICU, both at Southlake and CHEO. They come in, they help our nurses just to kind of restock those supplies. As you can see, we have a supply cart there, so they're quite familiar with our equipment and where to get them and to keep us all stocked up. We are, at Southlake, are very generous. Our community is amazing. We have some wonderful donators out there who donate blankets and hats, quilting clubs, knitting clubs. They come in and they are constantly providing us with some wonderful, wonderful things. And our volunteers, we get so many, it's hard to keep up with them. Our volunteers able to come in, they fold the blankets for us, they put them away nice and neatly. We do have some laundry facilities, so if something needs to be washed, they're more than willing to wash something for a family member. The other thing I mentioned before is, we have parents who do have younger children or siblings, and they come in with them. You don't have that grandma or anybody at home to watch them. You need to come into the hospital to feed your baby, so that sibling comes in. And what our volunteers are able to do, they're able to engage those siblings in play, color with them, kind of give the mom, the dad a little bit of release so that they can come in, feed the baby that needs to be attended to, knowing that their other children are being cared of. Our volunteers at Southlake here are just amazing. At Easter time, we had a family. She brought her little girls in, and she was kind of fretting because she didn't want them running around. And what my staff and some volunteers were able to do, they made like a little Easter egg hunt for them in one of the back rooms just to keep them occupied. So that was a really great support for moms. And the other things is we have like little name tags for babies, and our little IV boards, we make them ourselves. I have one volunteer, she brings her little baggie, and I've made some at home because I was thinking of you. So it's really, really fantastic that some of the roles and duties that they've been able to take on.
All right. So now we come to the stage where we're really looking at, we've got the framework for our program and looking at finding the right people, finding the right fit for this cuddler role at our hospitals. And so in discussions with Southlake and CHEO, we've discovered a lot of similarities in process and also what we seek and what we need for our patient population. Really, once a candidate has been recruited and selected for a NICU assignment, the volunteer attends a hospital orientation and attends a specific NICU training program. So both organizations, while we have different resources to train new volunteers, both organizations, offer and provide their volunteers with a checklist, meet with the NICU staff for orientation, and have the opportunity of shadowing experienced cuddler volunteers. So we found great benefit in having the experienced volunteer connect with a new recruit. Not only does it provide comfort to the new volunteer, but it also gives them that reassurance of those early jitters that they may have about coming into a new environment if they've never experienced it. But it gives them that volunteer-to-volunteer relationship and support as well. So when we think about, okay, we're going to assign, a volunteer candidate to ensure a right fit, the role requires volunteers who have experience in handling newborns or experience or familiarity with premature babies. We're also looking for volunteers with experience and working knowledge with children, essentially, to be able to relate more appropriately to that audience. Also, having experience with special needs or children and youth is always an asset to have that appreciation for some of the experiences or challenges that these patients may have. What is truly essential, in addition to other skills required, is having strong interpersonal, social, and communication skills. You really do need a volunteer who has a good ability to initiate contact, conversation, has a calm and pleasant manner to navigate the critical care environment and the staff present in that environment. So having the ability to adapt as well to the different interactions with a multidisciplinary team is definitely essential. And obviously, to most, especially us in the hospital, is having that comfort in observing anxious, stressed families who may be frequently in times of crisis and can truly be able to recognize, and empathize with the family dynamic and what they're going through, and be able to deliver that, calm, pleasant manner and appreciate the challenges that this young families that are going through. While a lot of our volunteers are sitting down and rocking and cuddling babies, our role definitely requires the ability to have the physical requirements of the role to be able to do that. So strong upper body strength, the capacity to be seated for extended periods of time. So there is a physical requirement for our volunteers as well. All right, so with all those lovely requirements and finding the right fit, we certainly encounter, both organizations have encountered some challenges, and what we've both agreed upon and identified is that we may not always have a baby to cuddle for our volunteers. So the reality is that while we might have low admission rates, or that the presence, there's a high presence of unstable infants, these factors certainly can lead to challenges for our volunteers who wish to keep productive and do something valuable and useful while they're with us. So some of the challenges that Sandra and I have identified in our respective programs is that
we see a high turnover of volunteers. So in speaking to the fact that we need to find the right fit, having that confident volunteer, who can gauge and assess the staff and the environment is definitely a factor. We definitely need volunteers who can initiate that conversation and interact both with the staff and the families. So while somebody might love to cuddle and be interactive with an infant, our volunteers who are have more of a shy disposition or more of the introverted type volunteer might have a harder time finding things to do, which can lead to high turnover with our volunteer population. So really can't stress the importance of having and needing a special person who's quite outgoing and be able to navigate and manage those dynamics within the environment. And when there are no babies to hold, we have volunteers who have other duties that Sandra has highlighted. So, for example, if there's the opportunity to play with siblings, to free up parents and provide them some respite, so that, or to provide them the opportunity to focus on their sick baby. There's also the impact of visiting guidelines where siblings may not be permitted to enter the unit, especially during peak season. I think we all know what peak season looks like in our respective facilities, so even the slightest cold or runny nose can put a restriction on who can visit and coming into the environment itself. And that some of our guidelines for our volunteers, for example, would be that volunteers are not allowed to interact with babies who are in isolation. So we're always talking about the interaction for volunteers to have contact with stable babies. So what's also unique to CHEO as well is that we have the presence of the Ronald McDonald Family Room. So we have 4 sleep rooms on our within our NICU, but we have a family lounge that has been designed for families to use and have a bit of a home away from home feel, but yet still be able to be close enough to their child. So we have the presence of Ronald McDonald, who offer resources of volunteers who can support families within the environment and help them navigate the lounge, navigate the little mini kitchen that we have available for them, the sleep rooms, and just really give them, the families, the opportunity to access the resources that are more homely and give them a sense of reducing stress and anxiety and still give them a home base feel to their environment. So we have a question now, just we want to kind of throw it out to everybody before we move on. Thinking about the cuddler role that you have in your institution, just kind of reflect a little bit on some of your challenges. We would love to hear about what some of challenges you have faced, and has your program evolved and what kind of prompted the change? Annette and I, we've looked at our program and we've seen how we've had to make some changes, and over the course from when it started till now. So we would be really interested to hear what others have had to do and whether or not they've found it successful. The other area that we're interested in hearing from everybody is just some of your retention successes for your volunteer. Going back to what Nanette said, we've had just a little bit of a high turnover. Finding that right fit can be challenging. Meeting that really outgoing person who's not afraid to speak up and say hello to people. So just kind of seeing what other institutions are doing would be great. So we're going to carry on. So type in your answers, and we'll get to it near the end. So the next part we're going to move into is, and did a great job talking about some of our challenges. So what were some of our solutions? So here we thought about, just expanding that cuddler role and moving it into our pediatrics. We've been talking basically about the role of the cuddler and what they do in the NICU. But is there possibilities if we can redirect those volunteers to the PICU where possible and the inpatient unit for added support? So here at CHEO, they have a child life specialist, and they've been able to redirect some of their volunteers who are looking for something extra to do because there's no babies or whatever to their inpatient overflow unit, which is under their child life specialist. But what we've done here at Southlake is we don't have a child life specialist. So how can we use these volunteers to benefit some of our patients on our pediatric unit? And that's what we've done. We've expanded it, and we've given them duties on the unit. So going back to that, looking for that really assertive person, they come onto the pediatric unit. They have to introduce themselves to the nurse and make that conversation. Is there any family on the floor that could use a break who we could go visit? Is there any little babies? Mom needs to go grab a coffee. I can just, quickly sit in the room with them, play with them. We have a lot of POGO patients that are on their floor that are here for us for a little bit. Do they need to have do they want to play? So our volunteers, they have a pediatric activity cart that they've made. Yet again, our community is fantastic. We get tons of donations. We have, sports teams and kids coming in. They've had birthday parties. They've donated all of their birthday gifts to the pediatric floor. The sports team, they decided they want to raise money, and one of their fundraising things was to collect toys for sick kids. So the volunteers come. When those toys are dropped off, they organize them for us, and they make an activity chart. So little, fidget toys that kids can play with just in the bed, coloring, Lego and stuff. So they take the cart, they go room to room, they introduce themselves, they hand out, stuff that kids can play with. We have our nice Starlight Foundation has Wii games, so they can sit and play those video games with them and interact with them in that respect. Some of the other things that we have them do, we have playrooms. We have lots of toys that need to be cleaned. So they check all the toys. They make sure that all the play equipment isn't damaged, and they clean all the toys for us. We want to make sure that there's nothing in those playrooms that is a choking hazard, so they stay on top of all that for us. The other thing is they lead craft projects, and they maintain all of our craft supplies and everything like that. Here at Southlake, we have within our pediatric unit, we have a number of outpatient clinics. So we have moms coming in with their babes for jaundice testing. We have asthma clinic and urgent care clinics. So as they're waiting for their turn, this is a great opportunity for our volunteers to, just engage them in play, bring them to the playroom, bring out those coloring books, set up that craft, put a movie on for them, and kind of entertain them as they wait for their doctor's appointment. And that's been really successful. But yet again, going back to what Nanette said, we really need that assertive volunteer who's not afraid to go up to the family and introduce themselves, not afraid to go up to the staff and introduce themselves and seek out the opportunities on the floor to engage those children in play. So that's our presentation, and that's kind of our overview of our volunteer cuddler program. So maybe we can go back, Doug, and look at some of the answers to the questions that we posed throughout our presentation.
Sure. So one of the comments that came in was Beth said volunteers in their cuddler program are also on call for pediatrics as well, and sometimes even they also volunteer in other areas of the hospital. Just as a way to sort of extend that resource around to make better use of it, to make sure they're active as much as they can.
Fantastic. Seems like we've all have the same solution.
Yeah. Erica says that their hospital does have a child life department. She highly recommends it if possible. They're trained in infant and child development and coping, and they also train and supervise the pediatric volunteers as well. And I think any hospital that does have the child life specialist certainly agree with that and appreciate that. But as you said, not everybody has them at this point. So. One of the, I think Robin has put in a comment about better communication with volunteer coordinators when not on the unit. I think as a way to retain volunteers and have that, that better communication that sort of coordinates the activities better and makes it a more satisfying experience.
Yes, I can see that. Sometimes there can be a little bit of a gap between the volunteer office and the actual floor. I know for myself, I'm the volunteer liaison, so if I'm not always informed when a new volunteer is coming to me, so I've really had to seek out the volunteer office and kind of put a plan into place. And what do you do? How do you communicate with the staff that you have a volunteer and needs to be?
So here at CHEO, once a volunteer is assigned, they are introduced to the staff in NICU, who are primarily care facilitators, and in the evening it'd be charge nurses. So we have a communication board in NICU so that all staff within the NICU are familiar with the roster of volunteers. So they see the schedule, but they also have, we print their pictures of who each volunteer is so that we can put a face to the name. But essentially the contact, the relationship between the volunteer and the staff of NICU is extremely important, with the understanding that there could be a fair bit of rotation with nursing, given the shift work that they do. But what we can say is that as a success is that we have pretty high consistency with who our care facilitators are, and as well as our unit clerks. So again, tying into the right fit of the volunteer, ensuring that they have those qualities really makes it beneficial to stay connected with the staff of the unit as well. But we still encounter some challenges on whether it's NICU or any other unit where we have lead staff who support their volunteers. It's just really, from my end as the Department of Volunteer Resources, is really to foster and nurture the relationship between the staff and their respective volunteers. So it's always a three-way dialogue to ensure that our volunteers are feeling connected to their departments, but also that the staff have the resources and support, not only from myself and the volunteer department, to remain connected to their volunteer team.
All right. We did have a couple questions that came in early on that I'd love to get Marsha's comment on as well. And this one, I think for everybody, might have something to add to this question. And this question came in from Casey. And Casey, correct me if I've misinterpreted your question, but she says she works as a child life specialist in a pediatric cardiac intensive care unit. So I'm assuming that she's talking about, for the rest of the question, I think she's talking about patients who may not be stable enough to be participating in the kind of cuddling program that we're talking about here, patients that would, with lots of lines, perhaps a ventilator or something like that, where you wouldn't be able to have a volunteer picking them up. So correct me if I'm wrong, Casey, but she says we do some boundary touch with parents currently, but medical staff tend to be anxious with families touching their infants. Any suggestions for more types of touch care specific to cardiology or implementation with staff? So Marsha, perhaps, yeah, so Casey has said yes, that's correct. So Marsha, if you had any thoughts there, and maybe we could hear after that from Nanette or Sandra about what they do with babies who maybe are not as stable enough to participate in this but still trying to implement that touch. So Marsha, maybe we could start with you.
Sure. Thanks, Doug, and thanks, Casey, for your question. With respect to the pediatric population, certainly I have had experience as a nurse in the pediatric intensive care unit and looking after those post-op hearts. With such technology around them, I understand the concern, but at that time, various types of touch, like even parental nearness, so that the children, I think we can't underestimate sort of smell recognition, again, not necessarily stroking for those children if they become agitated with various types of analgesia, but just a constant sort of on a hand, or similar to what I showed with the facilitated tuck, that boundary, as you mentioned, is very comforting. What we do in the neonatal intensive care unit is if a child can't come out because they have chest tube, we can do what we call a modified skin-to-skin. So if we have them in not an incubator but an overhead warmer, the parents can lean over, again, do either the facilitated tucking, the boundary, or just sort of lean over them to get an arm along the, not necessarily touch them to their skin, but to their chest, but put their arm along the child. We've also, just for your, I wouldn't go on because I know the time, but we also have published a study with respect to, with Janet Rennick as the lead from Montreal Children's, called Touch and Talk. And that was around the use of parental touching and talking during a procedure in the pediatric intensive care unit. And that would be in, it was in the actually Journal of Pediatric Nursing in 2012, Johnston, Rennick, and Campbell-Yeo et al. Maternal touch and talk for invasive procedures in infants and toddlers. So we can provide you with that if that's helpful.
All right, thanks, Marsha. So, Sandra and Nanette, any input on sort of what you guys do, either from a community hospital and ICU, Sandra, and these more critical babies that perhaps shouldn't be picked up as often, or what if there's a role for volunteers with those babies?
So I get her frustration. Being an NICU nurse, we're very territorial when it comes to our babies, and you know, you've spent so much time working on them to get them settled, and they're settled, and then a parent wants to come in and hold from just kind of taking that point of view from the nurse. It is it's hard to let go, and I think what it comes down to is education and communication, because a lot of this old thoughts, you know, linger along in an ICU setting about not touching and letting the baby sleep and letting the baby grow. And that old philosophy is still rampant and quite strong within an ICU. And stuff like today and Marsha's talk on how important it is just not to do the stroking, but just the light touches and the nearness, and how beneficial that is. I think it's taking your staff and providing education sessions and brainstorming with staff, getting them involved in the decision making of what we can do. You'll get more buy-in from ICU staff on getting parents to be able to come in and just even, you know, just putting the hand on the head, or putting the hand gently on the hand to get that little bit of a touch going. So I can see from a child life specialist how frustrating that would be. And but yeah, you know, if it's an unstable baby, the touching and picking up is quite, especially with all the lines, can be quite difficult. So my solution would be just more education for the staff so that they feel more comfortable.
Yes, and thank you for both of you ladies identifying those very common experiences here at CHEO. In addition to that, is that we might have a situation where the baby has settled in the arms of a volunteer, for example, and you know, there's some question about, you know, well, can I just continue holding this baby who's all nice and settled, or is it okay if I, you know, or should I be putting them back into their crib and letting them, you know, settle naturally without any interaction once they've settled down? So those are very common experiences that we've had as well for our volunteers to look at. Okay, well, once a baby has settled, went from unsettled to settled, you know, can I still continue on that, you know, journey with that settled baby? But yes, the reality of having unstable patients definitely is a challenge for us as well, and looking at, you know, how else can the volunteer be a connection to these patients, and always offering support to the families who are there as well to provide respite and whatnot. But like Sandra said, you know, finding the opportunity to have those discussions for education awareness, and looking at, you know, other not necessarily interventions, but opportunities to have the nearness or the light touch or modified touch. So we here at the hospital experience very, very similar experiences as well. So I hear the concern.
And I'll only make one comment, is that there are the extreme cases for those, you know, the chest is still open, post-op cardiac care. But there are a lot of babies who we consider unstable, but if you actually think about the literature would say that the contact and the parental presence would actually improve physiologic stability, improve sleep, and actually increase your likelihood for a more stable patient. So it's not, we need to, as you say, very much increase awareness and get the evidence out there for care providers.
Great, great answers. This is a question for you, Marsha. Christine's asking. She says it's been mentioned that breastfeeding during painful procedures can be comforting for babies. Up to what age is this still beneficial? And how would you suggest initiating this with resistant staff members that feel it might be a choking hazard or something like that?
Yeah, thank you. So definitely we know that breastfeeding is highly efficacious to decrease pain associated with early exposure to pain, such as intramuscular injections of vitamin K just after birth, for any needles and immunizations. Both likely what the studies have told us is that it's the breastfeeding more than the ingestion of breast milk that's most efficient, and that it's the closeness with the mother. It can be used with great efficacy up to a year, and so it's very important up within the first year for immunizations. And we estimate that those infants who are still breastfeeding into the second year, that this would still be efficacious. It's just that there's limited information with respect to research in this area. But if the mother is breastfeeding her 18-month-old, certainly they could use that, and perhaps in combination with other strategies such as sweet taste or distraction. With respect to choking, there's been no evidence to show that choking is associated, that actually it's better to breastfeed the baby throughout the procedure. There is some thought that you should stop them because they might choke, but this is not the case at all, and there's been nothing to show that this would happen.
All right, thank you. And Christine, if you get in touch with me by email, or Ann Watkins, who sends a lot of the information out for these webinars, we can certainly put you in touch with Marsha or her colleague, Dr. Christine Chambers, and all of their information about it doesn't have to hurt campaign and all that sort of stuff. There's lots of great information there. And there's also a couple of leading researchers at your organization, Christine, that we can certainly put you in touch with that have been a part of this work as well. So don't hesitate to reach out. We can get you all that information. This is an interesting question that we've actually discussed among our group here with Sandra and Nanette and Marsha. Barbara is saying that their NICU requires families to sign a consent for volunteer cuddlers. We find it difficult to get the families to sign up. How can we make the volunteer cuddler program more appealing to those families? And she's asking, do all sites require consent for cuddlers? And I'll just start by saying, we didn't ask this specifically on our initial survey when we asked about cuddler programs. We didn't even think to ask about consent, but it did come up a lot in my conversations with various hospitals across the country, and it really ranged from some people saying, well, it benefits the outcomes of the children, and the evidence shows it, so we consider it sort of standard of care, and it's an opt-out thing. We tell people that it's part of our program, and we assume until we're told otherwise that volunteers will be cuddling these babies if necessary, and it ranges all the way down to the other end where people are much more rigorous in getting a consent from the family, and it's more of an opt-in instead of an opt-out kind of program. But Sandra and Nanette, any thoughts on the consent process and how it works in your organization?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Okay, go ahead. Okay, thanks. It's an excellent question, and we don't have a formal process where we have the parent or the caregiver sign off, nor have we had the experience where a parent has refused. So it's been very well received. The staff, because the assignment of the baby to the volunteers by staff, we haven't really had any resistance, and so we haven't formalized the process, essentially. And the same with us. We don't really have a formalized, exact same thing as what Nanette was saying. Our volunteer program is part of our NICU. When a parent comes in they're told that this is our program. And our volunteers, as Nanette said, their pictures are up on the wall. They're part of our team. And when it's all, what we do tell them is that it's the nurse's judgment whether or not a baby needs to be snuggled, and if we're feeling that their baby would benefit from a snuggle if they're crying, we do have a volunteer present that can provide that service. And our feedback from our family, we've had nothing negative. We've never had a family say no. When we introduce it, when we admit, they're all, oh, that's great. That's fantastic. That sounds wonderful. Feedback from my volunteers or family members have come in and they've thanked them. We've never been an issue. So it's a hard question to answer. It's like Doug was saying, it's just part of our unit, and it's definitely a verbal communication that exists between our staff and the family.
And I would say, Doug, I don't have the same experience as Sandra and Nanette with the Cuddler program, but when I think of that question, I think fundamentally to myself that one of the key aspects, I think, for people if they have a Cuddler program or are thinking about it, it's really one of the key components is to increase awareness of the importance of touch provided by a parent to babies, and to use the program actually to be informative, to raise awareness for families. Therefore, your number one aspect would be to have a parent, like a mother, a parent, or a known family member who can be consistent to be with the child. So then if you used an informed consent process, all that information and awareness would be provided to the families. Hopefully that would mean that actually the families would be more likely to be there. And then once families are feeling engaged, they're feeling that they have a part, then in their absence, I would think that together the consent process would be that this is something that you actually are also asking us to do for you in your absence, knowing how important it is to have touch for your baby. So I do see that the consent process serves more than one role.
Great comment. That's that's been a lot of our conversations as a group, and that whole, I think we started, Sandra and them started with the whole concept of, do we even need these programs, since we're trying so hard to make sure that we reduce all the barriers from having mom present in the first place, and recognizing that there are patient populations that do require this, and then that whole communication piece with the families that are there, and that it's not a cut and dry sort of sign a consent form sort of thing. So it's interesting. Barb says thank you for that conversation, but it really, in my conversations with this group and with others across the country, it's really sort of a culture of the organization, and how much communication and how family centered is your organization, and really communicating with the families and having that relationship with them, that you can have this conversation with them and demonstrate the benefits to them, etc. So it's really been an interesting exercise. And this has been a bit of a, almost seems like a bit of a renaissance, and then we went from years ago with everything was focused on pharmacological solutions, a pill for everything, and then it transitioned into sort of technology was going to save us, MRIs and everything else, and now we're sort of going back to grassroots and saying, maybe we've forgotten about human contact and the importance of that, and maybe we need to inject a little bit more of that into the clinical setting and regain some of the benefits of that. So it's been a really interesting exercise. I think we're just about out of questions here, so maybe we'll just hand it over to our, we're just about out of time, so maybe we'll just hand it over to our presenters, and we'll go in the order that they appeared here, starting with Marsha, and just if you have any closing comments that you'd like to wrap things up with here before we close off, anything you'd like to leave the audience with.
Doug, I think really the take-home message that I would like to say is that, exactly to reiterate what you just said, is that we need to find the right balance to bring human contact back into the care of newborns at all levels within the hospital, and hopefully lead that forward into the community. In order to do that, it's about raising awareness of all the benefits of touch and contact, and actually probably even more so the adverse effects of not doing it, to ensure that this culture change also brings along with it provisions to actually help families to be there. So if it's the walls of a single-room care facility versus open bay that provides parents with a bed and a place to eat and to remain with their child, if it means that it's providing places for families to eat and to have their other loved ones come with them, all those things, that whole culture really lends itself to, I think, the philosophy of trying to maintain a mother-baby dyad or family-baby dyad. And then in the absence of that, when all else has failed, when all those things have been tried, in those circumstances where there is a baby for whatever reason has been unable to have those benefits of touch from a family member, then that's where we can utilize the resources of cuddlers who are prepared and understand that there's various forms of effective touch for these babies.
All right.
Well put, Marsha.
Yeah, Sandra.
I think she summed it up beautifully. Yeah. Just kind of focusing on reducing those barriers to the mom-baby dyad and the cuddling. I think that's absolutely is the forefront. And then using cuddler programs as an extension, as an adjacent to that family-centered care is important. And I think, every hospital is different. You have to look at what your needs are, your population needs, and whether or not a volunteer cuddler program is going to meet it. The challenges are definitely, is there going to be a baby there? So looking for other things that a volunteer could do and finding the right fit. I think Nanette summed it up beautifully when she was talking about the right fit.
Absolutely, and really to wrap things up is really to look at the end of the day, our volunteers are here to support, enhance the delivery of care that our staff provide, and really to be part of that team approach and to ultimately meet the need of our organization's goals and missions to support the families that come into our care. So all of the above. Thank you very much.
And you know what? And I just as listen to you guys, which I agree wholeheartedly. I would just also say that one of the key areas, I think, if I was moving forward to think about a cuddler program, I would also ensure that I had very strong family involvement in any of the creation of those, to get their feedback about how they feel, what they would need, where they see that cuddlers would best fit, to be part of the team to create that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, yeah. All right, well, thank you very much. And I hope one key message that we certainly don't leave without highlighting is the importance of volunteers in our organizations. It's not just, they play a very large role in our organizations. It's not just about helping to keep the waiting rooms clean and the play areas clean, but really in contributing to improving outcomes for children. So the important role that volunteers play throughout organizations, like our children's hospitals and other community hospitals across Canada and around the world. I really want to highlight the importance our volunteers play and thank them for all the work they do.
Hear, hear.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you, Marsha, Sandra, and Nanette. Great presentation, and thank you for the audience to the audience for joining us and for contributing their comments and questions. It certainly enriches the conversation, as you can see when we hear from everyone across the community. We do our webinars every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, and hopefully you can sign up for our newsletters, etc., and get information about what the topics are in the coming weeks. So you can always join us back here. On September 2nd, next week, we'll be hearing from a couple of colleagues, experts in the child and youth mental health world, talking about what role schools can play in the pathway to youth mental health care. And we'll be hearing from Dr. Stan Kuchar from Halifax and his colleague, Ms. Yifeng Wei, to talk about an evidence-based model that incorporates various components designed to more easily and effectively address youth mental health care needs. And following that, on September 9th, we'll have a very special webinar presentation because September 9th is International FASD Day, so Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder Day. FASD is the leading cause of preventable brain damage and birth defects in Canada. So we are going to be joined by award-winning journalist and author Ann Dowsett-Johnson to talk about dismantling the stigma and how we can address an alcoholic culture that blames and shames the FASD community. And we'll also be hearing from two colleagues, Dr. Dorothy Badry and Dr. Deb Goodman, who have developed a practical set of tools and resources, a caregiver curriculum, they call it, that will be useful for healthcare practitioners and caregivers of children with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, and that's work that's been funded by the Public Health Agency of Canada. So there's lots more information in the calendar of upcoming webinars. You can find that calendar on the front page of our Knowledge Exchange Network at ken.caphc.org, so you can always check there for more information. So some great stuff coming up in the next few weeks. Thanks for joining us today, and we hope to see you back here next week. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.